into a purchase order with Shotspotter.
Mayor, there are 10 letters, one of which was submitted on behalf of 9 local organizations that were received by the city clerk's office in opposition to the proposed action, expressing concerns related to ShotSpotter's reputation, its cost, the effectiveness of the technology, and its inability to address the root causes of violent crimes. 2 letters were received stating support for the gunfire detection system, noting that neighborhood safety is a top priority for our small community. 1 letter providing recommendations to conduct a pilot of new ShotSpotter technology, as well as a submittal by Councilmember Kennedy of a Chicago Sun-Times article entitled "City's Watchdog Finds ShotSpotter Rarely Leads to Evidence of Gun Crimes Investigatory Stops." I would also note that the Public Safety Committee received 3 letters in support of and 3 letters in opposition to the ShotSpotter gunfire technology detection technology. All the correspondence was posted online, distributed to the council, and is part of the record for this item.
Thank you. And this matter came to us previously and through the committee and was essentially, I wouldn't say delayed or put on hold, but requests were made for more information by Mr. Kennedy and others. And the police department was charged with seeking answers to those questions. And now we're back to provide answers, and members of the community as well raised issues that needed to be run to ground. With that, I'll turn to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As you indicated, this item was presented to the Public Safety Committee on September 23rd, and Lieutenant Bill Grisofi is with us this evening to provide a supplemental presentation. A number of questions were raised, and the police department, particularly the lieutenant, has done his best to pull together some additional information, and you'll hear that in the presentation. But I'd like to take a moment and just provide a little bit of context. As the city clerk just reported out, some of the comments that we've received said that ShotSpotter does nothing to address the conditions that lead to crime. And I would agree with that. I think we need to be clear on really what this system is. It is a sound detection system that can pick up gunfire. Why is that important? When gunfire occurs in a neighborhood, sometimes people call the police, sometimes they don't, because they think someone else may call. When people call, it's often unclear exactly where it came from. And that makes it, that adds to the time for the police department to respond. In the event that someone is injured, response time can be a matter of life and death. At the Public Safety Committee, our fire chief testified that when he was working in Sacramento, and that city has ShotSpotter, it aided emergency medical staff responding to victims quicker. So it's a sound detection system that when it identifies a gunshot, provides information to the police department that allows a quicker response. That's when the investigatory process begins. So again, some of the criticism is ShotSpotter doesn't aid in the investigation. It doesn't aid in prosecution. No, of course not. It just simply alerts the police department that gunfires occurred in a certain area, accurate to within 82 feet. That allows the police department to show up, begin canvassing an area, look for evidence, if there's victims, to get them the aid that they need. That's the context. And sadly, Mayor and council people, and you will know this, our community has suffered an awful lot of gun-related violence and gun incidents. At 12:30 this morning, there was shots fired at Maple and Raymond. Not a week or 2 weeks prior, Councilmember Rivas was hosting a walk of neighbors who had come together because shots had been fired on Raymond. We see this in a number of areas in our city, and the police department feels that the ShotSpotter system may be helpful. It's just one more tool to help us address the issue of gun violence in our community. I agree with them, and that's why we're bringing it forward. I wanted to provide that context. With that, let me please turn it over to Lieutenant Bill Grisofi.
Thank you, City Manager. And thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with this presentation on this potentially life-saving technology. This is an important piece of equipment that, as the city manager eloquently put, will help us in our investigations. I don't have the, I do. So since January of 2019, the city has received over 300 shots fired type calls, calls for service. We've also had over 400 instances of gun-related crimes. This is not just shooting-related crimes, but any type of gun-related crimes, possession of guns, possession of ammunition. All of these incidents occurred that add up to over almost 400 incidents over the last 2 years. Gun violence has resulted in close to 40 members of the Pasadena community who were either killed or injured as a result of gunfire. And as been said several times by Chief Perez, the department has seized almost 700 firearms over the same time period. Shotspotter system, what is it? The definition is a system provides gunshot detection, alert, and analysis services, which enhances the police department's response and investigation. Essentially, it's a deterrent system for would-be shooters while providing precise location for rapid response by first responders, both law enforcement and medical response. The company has several core capabilities in the system. The first is detect, obviously, because of the sensors that are installed. It quickly locates gunfire and enables a fast and precise response by first responders. It protects not only members of the community, but the officers responding. The information that's provided by ShotSpotter gives us critical response information, and I will get into that in detail a little bit later. And as the city manager mentioned, oftentimes people are afraid to call in 911 and report shootings for whatever reason, and I'll get into those in just a bit. But by the police department getting these alerts and responding on their own without a 911 call or without assistance from the members of the community, we can get there and provide the safety for them and start doing our investigations immediately. As I mentioned, oftentimes people are not interested in calling the police for a variety of reasons. One of them, they don't really know if it's gunfire. They hear the sounds, they think it may be backfires of vehicle backfires, fireworks, so they just don't call in. Oftentimes people are fearful to call, fearful of retaliation. Sometimes they just say, hey, you know what? I think my neighbor Joe is gonna be the one who actually calls. So they don't call themselves. And sometimes, and sadly, there is a resignation that cops will never show up. Why am I even gonna call 911? It's estimated that in the United States, almost 80% of gunfires or gunshots are never reported to 911, which is concerning. So I'll tell you a little bit about the system itself. We provided the company ShotSpotter with 2.5 years of gun-related data, all the information that I mentioned earlier. They did an analysis of the data, and they determined where the sensors that are proposed are to be installed. This encompassed about a 3 square mile area of Pasadena community that are most impacted by gunshots. Just so that you can, it's difficult to see on the map, but on the borders, on the west border is the 210 freeway, on the north border is Montana, on the east border is Hill Avenue, and on the south border is the 210 freeway. That's generally the proposed area, 3 square mile area that they are suggesting that the sensors get placed. Again, this is based on the data that we provided, and this is the data that shows these are the communities that are most impacted by gun-related crimes. As a matter of fact, the data that we provided, or that area that's included in the red box, accounted for in that 2.5 year period that we provided them stats. It was 66.7% of the gun-related homicides, 73% of the gun-related aggravated assaults, 40% of other weapon law violations, and about 55% of the shots fired calls, all encompassed in that red box area. So if we decide to go with the ShotSpotter system, what happens is based on the information that we provided them, ShotSpotter technicians, we don't do it. We're not aware of where the sensors are placed. Nobody from the police department is. They come in and they install various sensors throughout the proposed area. Once up and running, the system listens for loud impulsive sounds such as gunshots. It will record or it will recognize fireworks as well, but those are filtered out. And once they hear these sounds, they have to have at minimum of 3 sensors hear the sound. Once they hear that, it generates an incident. That incident not only is generated for the equipment to be evaluated, for the equipment to be evaluated, but it also is able to determine within an 82-foot radius where that shot is coming from. They guarantee a 90% accuracy on that location. Studies show that it's a little bit closer to 97%, but they will guarantee an 90% accuracy rate. Once that incident is generated, the gunshot is generated, it immediately goes to some software, artificial intelligence software, which reviews it. That software is meant to filter out any non-gunfire incidents, such as fireworks backfires. The software is able to determine what is a gunfire and what is not a gunfire. Once the software reviews it, and it's determined it's either a gunfire or it's probably gunfire, the system will send it to a human being, which is an acoustic expert out of ShotSpotter's Incident Review Center, and they then will listen to it and make the determination, yes, it is gunfire, or no, it's not gunfire. So it has that human review aspect of it. They will also determine if there are multiple guns being fired. They are able to differentiate between calibers if multiple guns are being shot. They're able to determine if there's a fully automatic weapon just by listening, and they're also able to determine if it's a high capacity type weapon. Okay. Once they determine that it is in fact a gunfire, and they confirm that, they will send an alert via officers' mobile devices, dispatch centers, computer system, and our devices that are our computer devices that are in vehicles. They will automatically alert Pasadena officers of the shots of the shooting. That happens within 60 seconds. Generally speaking, our response time to priority 1 or high priority calls is about 3 to 4 minutes. That's from the time we get the call to the time we respond. We are receiving the call in 60 seconds or less, which allows us to start en route to that location a lot sooner. So how does the ShotSpotter system work? So if we look at, this is what you would get on your mobile device, an alert, just like similar to a text message, tell you that there's gunfire, 10 rounds at such and such location. Once you click on that alert, it'll show you on a map where it's at. The 10 correlates with the 10 rounds, and it'll tell you where to go, the officers where to go. Again, this is within an 82-foot radius. Once you click on it, it will also provide you not only a precise location, but it'll give you a date and timestamp, which for investigations is very important. It'll tell you, again, if there's multiple shooters, automatic or high capacity weapons that are being used, and then it'll also provide you a short audio clip of the shooting. I will play for you at the end of the presentation a clip of this so that you understand exactly how it works. So the benefits, accuracy. The accuracy of the shots, or where the shots came from, is paramount for first responders. If in fact somebody is tragically struck by the gunfire, the quicker we get there, the quicker we can start providing life-saving measures and or paramedics. Seconds count when somebody is shot. The loss of blood, and I'll reference Chief Augustine, who mentioned it the other day. Minutes count regarding when somebody's losing blood. It's very important that they get the medical treatment immediately. Not only does it do that, but it helps us to preserve evidence. Helps us locate witnesses and potentially locate or apprehend the shooting suspect. I will tell you that on shootings, often we get several calls from different community members about a shots fired call. Sometimes they are sometimes they're fireworks, but oftentimes they are actual shootings. Unfortunately, it's a 2-block radius that we get this from. The information or the calls come in from a 2-block radius, meaning we don't know exactly where it happens. We know it happened within that 2-block area, but we don't have a precise location. Shotspotter provides us an 82-foot radius, which allows us to get there much quicker. Not only that, it provides the officers with better information when they're responding for their tactical response. It identifies multiple shooters and the number of rounds that were fired. It provides us with information about the types of weapons, if it's a high capacity or fully automatic. Our tactical response on a high capacity or fully automatic weapon is going to be significantly different from somebody if we just hear one shot being fired, or a semi-automatic weapon. And the information provides critical information for safer response by officers. Not only that, the evidence that is collected can be used or assist in criminal proceedings. It provides us the where and when. And it's important to understand that this is only one piece of evidence. We are not arresting individuals solely based on this one piece of evidence. We are not prosecuting individuals based on this one piece of evidence from ShotSpotter. It's merely a piece of the puzzle that our detectives need to put together for the whole picture to come clear. It works in concert with our other forensic evidence and detectives investigation. So this is a slide that I added after public safety. Some of the questions that came up regarding the review or other agencies that are using it. I spoke with these agencies here. If we were to start a contract with ShotSpotter, we would be the first in LA County. Northern California, several cities up there have the system already. They get very positive results from it and from community members. The city of Bakersfield, they probably are the closest one. They began in 2018. Their response times to shooting alerts went from 9 minutes, improved 9 minutes. They went from 12 minutes to 3 minutes. They decreased their response times to shooting calls by 9 minutes. Their activations have led to seizure of 37 firearms and the arrest of 50 different individuals. Again, they weren't necessarily arrested right then and there. Again, this was just a piece of the detective's investigation to find out who was responsible for the shootings. They liked the system so much that they renewed the contract in 2020, and they included an expansion of the system. They initially started with a 3 square mile program and expanded to more of the city. City of Fresno, they report a 96% accuracy rate, and again, they renewed their contract and expanded it in 2020. City of San Pablo, both the city of San Pablo and the city of East Palo Alto, I bring these up only because during public safety, the comment was made by a call-in that they were no longer using their system. That is not correct. City of San Pablo, they reported 70% decrease in incidents of gunfire. And again, they expanded not only the original contract, they expanded to 100% of their city. City of East Palo Alto recently renewed their contract as well. I have several other listings of cities that are using this that report reductions in gun violence. I think probably the most notable is what occurred in the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In that city, between the years of 2019 and 2020, they had 13 shootings where victims were struck by gunfire. And of those 13 shootings, they never received a 911 call. The only notification they received was from ShotSpotter. It's pretty impressive that they could respond solely on the basis of the ShotSpotter. We discussed some reviews of the system regarding the ShotSpotter accuracy, privacy issues. It is important to note that Oakland's Privacy Advisory Commission presented a report in 2021, March of this year, that they did not find any violations of surveillance use policy. They have a very specific policy that requires review by the surveillance use committee, that they didn't find any policies regarding the use of the system. And community members requested greater ShotSpotter coverage, just like San Pablo did and East Palo Alto. There was a study done by New York University Policing Project Study. In that review, they conducted a personal privacy assessment of the system. They determined that the risk of voice surveillance was extremely low. Again, this gets back to the fact that in order for the system to generate an incident, they have to have 3 of the sensors activated. And those sensors can be placed in a variety of areas. But unless somebody is yelling really loud and that sound is captured by the 3 different sensors, it won't generate a report. And even if it does generate a report, the software will immediately eliminate it as a gunfire. It's meant to detect impulsive, explosive type sounds, not voices. And they also, the New York University Policing Project Study did make some recommendations to Shotspotter. The majority of them they adopted. One of the things that I will talk about in that that they recommended was during the recording, which I'll play for you just a little bit. Initially, the sound bite of the shots being fired that they provide to the officers in the alert. It initially was 3 seconds before the shooting or before the shots rang out and 3 seconds after the shots rang out. New York University Policing Project said that's too much, we need to shorten that. So it's now 1 second before the shots ring out and 1 second after the shots ring out. That's the entire clip that the agencies will get. Let's talk about the Macarthur Justice Center study. This was a study done out of Chicago. Macarthur Justice Center is a public interest law firm that is associated with Northwestern University. They do advocate for human rights and social justice through litigation. During their study, they determined that there was the efficiency of the Shotspotter system was not very good. Shotspotter hired Edgeworth Analytics, an independent auditing firm, to review that study that they did. And they concluded that the Macarthur study is misleading because of the inappropriate data source. Essentially what happened is the data that they provided or that they used for their study, Macarthur study, was data that they received from the Office of Emergency and Communications, OEMC. The OEMC is not part of Chicago's police department. It is a division of the city of Chicago that provides call taking and dispatching information for the Chicago Police Department. When they went there, they don't have the Chicago OEMC does not have accurate dispositions of their calls. The only information that they have is what they got initially. It does not provide any information as far as follow-up goes that Chicago Police Department does. They determined that, in fact, Edgeworth Analytics independent audit determined that the audit system had, the ShotSpotter system has a 97% accuracy rate. Chicago Office of Inspector General also did their own independent study, and they used the same data that the Macarthur Justice Center used. In their study, they concluded that ShotSpotter alerts rarely produced evidence of gun-related crimes based on the same data that was used by Macarthur. At no point did they ever question the accuracy of ShotSpotter system, as did Macarthur suggested. And they determined the value of ShotSpotter is ultimately a question of relative cost versus benefits. They admit in their conclusion of the Chicago Office of Inspector General, they admit that the Chicago Police Department and the city needs to make a decision due to the lack of available data. And they said in the conclusion that they were unable to reach a well-informed conclusion because of the difficulties in matching ShotSpotter events with police records. Again, that's the OEMC's records compared. They never compared it to the police department's records, and that was the issue with their findings. And again, Chicago themselves renewed their contract with ShotSpotter. As far as the fiscal impact, the funding for this will come out of Supplemental Law Enforcement Fund for the first year. And I believe, City Manager, you wanted to speak about this?
We just wanted to mention, because again, some of the correspondence that we've seen suggests that there may be better use for the funds Supplemental law enforcement are particular restricted funds that can only be used to augment police services. There's no clear list of what it can and cannot be spent on, but the intent of the fund is that it support police services. We believe that the expenditure for this use is in keeping with that. Some of the other uses that some members of our community have suggested would not be authorized expenditures for supplemental law enforcement. So this does not take any money away from the city's general fund. These are particular funds for the particular use of the police department, and this is in keeping with the spirit and intent of those funds.
And I will mention that the request is for a 3-year subscription. We do not own any of the equipment. All the equipment is serviced by Shotspotter. They install it, they maintain it. We only pay for a subscription. That's the extent of the contract. And with
What I'd say, and Mayor, I know that it's been suggested, some people have suggested a pilot program for perhaps just a few months. Given the time it takes to put in the equipment and to get a pilot up and running, that's really 3 months is not viable. Time really does go by quickly. We do think that 3 years is a reasonable amount of time for a pilot. We suspect that we will know within the first 12 months whether the system is helpful or not. So ultimately, it's the council's decision. There is some impact on pricing. The shorter the duration, the higher the annual pricing. The pricing that we've been quoted is based on a 3-year contract. Councilmember Hampton did ask us to explore because it was said that the city of Atlanta, Georgia got 3 months for free. That was a deal that was on the table a long time ago. That's not on the table for us now, and Atlanta, Georgia is a little bit bigger than we are.
Thank you. And with that, Mayor, if I could, I'd like to play a clip of the, just so everyone has an understanding of how the system works. It's a quick video. We can play it a couple of times. I'll walk quickly through.
Please, Lieutenant, I think it's important for people to really be listening in to what is recorded and then communicated to officers in the field. And my understanding, Lieutenant, from the, and by the way, very good job of addressing the issues that were raised. Thank you. But my understanding from the presentation on public safety is this is what we're about to hear would be the only thing that is ultimately is recorded and makes its way to our officers in the field, correct?
Yes, this is the information that is provided to the police department,
And
officers and dispatch center.
And that was the result of adjusting over time the technology, and that adjustment came with the assistance. I don't recall if it was the assistance of the ACLU or what national organization.
ACLU, it was New York's university study
Mhm.
supported by ACLU.
The national ACLU?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
And I'll walk everybody through this if I may.
Sure, please.
So this is, again, this is the alert that you get on your phone, mobile device, whatever it is. I'll walk you through this. We can play it a couple times. So you get the alert on your phone, you click on it. Again, it shows you where it is, gives you the 12 rounds that are being fired at that location. You can get further information. Top left, to provide you the date and timestamp, gives you the address. On the bottom right is an audio button. If you click on that button, it provides you the actual sound clip of it. Again, if you could play that again, I appreciate it. It's important. Yes, please. Again, the location, the alerts you get, the location, the rounds. Again, that's an 82-foot radius. Gives you specific information. It also tells you see in the middle where it says moving shooter, and it tells you that they're moving at 8 miles per hour. And I'd like to emphasize again, this is only 1 second on the front end and 1 second of recording on the back end, and that's the only clip that law enforcement agencies will receive.
And I'd not noticed, if you go back to the slide, I'd not noticed the moving shooter.
Yes.
Can you just talk about that?
Well, what that indicates to us is that the person was either on some type of transportation, either vehicle, bicycle, whatever. They can tell based on the triangulation of the sensors. It can tell you where the shootings were coming from. It can tell you if it's moving in a direction that indicates exactly where they're being shot from. So it means somebody's in a car, essentially.
In a car and
On a bike.
if they're moving in a northerly direction versus an easterly direction.
Yes, which is important for responding officers. They know that if this car is moving in a northerly direction, they're going to obviously go to a northerly direction first.
Thank you. Again, Lieutenant, very good job of responding to the questions raised by members of the community, as well as Mr. Kennedy and other members of the, Mr. Hampton and other members of the Public Safety Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a recommendation of the police chief. Is the police chief signed on? He's not. No. Okay. So this is ultimately a recommendation of Chief Perez.
Well, it's the staff's recommendation. It's my recommendation along with the chief. I believe the chief is trying to log into the meeting. This is some technology that, over the years, I think going back as far as maybe 20 years, there's some discussion about utilizing this technology. It wasn't quite there yet. It seems like the system has improved, that some of the concerns around privacy have been addressed. Again, we know that there's members of our community who are not comfortable with the police having even this limited technology, but this is all they get. They hear the gunshot and they know where to go. I myself would not call that surveillance. And for the council members and the mayor, that when you go out to a neighborhood following a shooting, whether someone has been tragically injured or killed, or even if there's been no victim, what do we hear from the residents? We hear residents saying, please install cameras, please increase your presence, please be visible, please use technology. I know that there's concerns that people have about the police and the application of technology. We hear it whether the issue is automatic license plate readers or cameras, or now with Shotspotters. The irony, in my view, Mayor and council members, is that this is technology that's generally available pretty much to the general public. People have cameras on their homes. People have private ALPR readers, license plate readers, when people drive by their home. We're simply asking that the police department be able to avail itself to technology that's generally available to assist in response and investigation of crimes. This system is pretty straightforward. All they're hearing is shots and they respond.
Just very quickly, and then I'll turn to, I think it's Councilmember Rivas, followed by Vice Mayor Wilson. But Lieutenant, during the Public Safety Committee review of this matter, you covered the sequence of the triangulation that is picked up by the technology. So I consider that a first level of review. And then that information is sent to, or maybe you did cover it, the center, but I want to highlight it. Then it's sent to a center that is staffed 24/7.
Yes.
And that information is then reviewed by a real live human being, correct?
An audio expert, yes.
And that audio expert at the center then makes or conducts the second level of review. And at that point, the information is sent to one of our officers in the field, correct?
Multiple officers.
Well, that's right.
Dispatch center, multiple officers, the vehicle computers.
And so really there are three levels of review. The technology, which really just spots, as it says, the firing of a weapon illegally, because it is illegal to fire a weapon anywhere within our city. And that information then has received a second and third level of review by real live human beings.
And if I may, I think it's important to realize that once it's entered into the software system, it automatically filters out anything other than gunfire. And we never get notified of that. That's never provided to us. So if it doesn't meet the threshold of bouncing off the 3 different sensors, being in a concussion type sound, we'll never get that information.
So besides the levels of review, there's also a deterrent effect. There's also the issue of rendering aid to any potential victims that this would assist us with, and then also preserving evidence, and then possibly, hopefully, catching anybody who's illegally fired a weapon.
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lieutenant, for your presentation. I guess a very minor point of correction is that the policing project is part of NYU Law School, and it was founded by a professor of mine, Professor Barry Friedman, who's pretty much dedicated much of his career, I think, from this point on, to police reform and police oversight. And so I really do put a lot of stock into their analysis and their conclusions. The first question I had for the accuracy rates that you cited, for example, 96% for Fresno.
Yes.
Can you explain how they determined that? Was that by, they went out to the location that Shotspotter directed them to, and they found physical evidence of a shooting? Is that essentially how it works?
Yes, essentially that's what happens. They gave them that 82 foot radius. Officers respond there, and it's 96% of the time it's in that 82 foot radius.
Okay,
The other times it's apparently out.
right.
And that can be a result of bouncing off large buildings. The sensor may not pick it up accurately.
Okay. And then my other question is, are there any other companies that provide a similar technology or service? Your presentation is very compelling, but I just want to make sure that we're not overlooking any competitors that we should also be looking at and can appropriately compare the 2 or 3 or however many there are.
There are gunshot detection systems out there, not to the level that Shotspotter has. Most of them don't have the extension, don't have the range that Shotspotter has, and none of them have the review center that I mentioned with the review by the software and then review by the human being. And they don't provide that information. They don't have somebody there staffed 24/7. They don't have the system, so they don't have that type of technology or that type of system.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lieutenant. That felt the presentation was the first time I'm seeing it, but I thought it was quite thorough and informative. I'm wondering, 3 years is a long time. I heard, I think the mayor or someone referenced that we should know how we're doing in a year. I know it gets more expensive. One way to mitigate this would be, if we had a contract that was 3 years, but there was maybe a penalty if we got out after 1 year. There's no sense if it's not working after 1 year to continue it when it's not being valuable. Have you thought about structuring this in a way that, once again, I understand 3 months is awful short to test the technology, but a year, I'm hoping we'll have some better visibility, and that came back to public safety. Then they could continue, you guys can continue a 3-year contract, but if it wasn't working, maybe there's some small penalty to get out. Has that been investigated at all?
Yes, sir. So the contract, we do have the ability to opt out of the contract after the first year. No penalties.
No.
As I mentioned, there is an increase in costs for the first year. If we just did 1 year, it would be $250,000 for that contract, and then subsequent years would be $210,000. But we do have the option. They do write that in the contract.
So if you got out, so is it a 3-year, is that an alternative contract that's 1 year? Or is it, if you just only go for 1 year, it's a different price for that first year?
If we decided to do the 1 year and not the 3 year, it would be $250,000 for the 1 year.
Okay, but if you stuck with the 3 year, it'd be 600 over 3 years. Is that correct?
640, yes.
Okay. So there's kind of a $50,000 penalty to get out early if you just do the math.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Thank you. Once again, I thought it was a helpful presentation, but I defer to my colleagues who are in public safety who have looked at this more closely.
Thank you.
And that termination clause, the city manager tells me is that a for convenience termination clause?
It
Good.
typically in all of our contracts of this type, we have our standard termination for convenience clause.
Okay. Next, and we've been joined by the police chief. Chief, did you have anything to add or before we move on?
Chief, it's *6 to unmute your phone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the presentation by Lieutenant Grisafi, and he has added all the details. At the essence of this, there are two important points. One is that we are trying to reduce the violence and changing. The more prevention we could do, the less actual policing we'll need. Over time, we believe that, in fact, you will see the amount of calls for service begin to drop when it comes to shots fired, which is hugely important for us. Getting to the scene as soon as one of these events occurs helps us create crime scenes as soon as we arrive, which is a huge difference. Lastly, there are some accountabilities on this technology. We want to ensure the community that any type of technology audits needed, we are open to those. As many know in the community, whenever they have issues with some of our technology, I will bring them into the station to help us with those audits or to look at what we're doing. And that is equally as essential as having the actual technology. So I present that information as added information to the great presentation by Lieutenant Grisafi.
Yeah. And Chief, the audits that you described, those audits would, of course, be made public and be part of, for example, the oversight, the work of the Oversight Commission to ensure that what we have been, both what we've been guaranteed by Shotspotter as well as the safety protocols in terms of some of the concerns involving the recording of information have been addressed. Those will be part of reports to the Public Safety Committee as well as potentially to the work of the Oversight Board, correct?
That's absolutely correct. The work being done by the Police Commission and the Public Safety Committee is going to overlap at times. And my chief's report oftentimes provides all the information from use of force for the different type of audits. So once any one of those boards requests a review, I have been pretty open with my chief's reports to ensure that it's reviewed and talked about, and we could develop some of the accountability factors that we need to have the trust of the community. Over time, every few months, it's important to look at what we've done with calls for service and see if, in fact, we do see a decrease as this technology is utilized. So it's going to be an important part in our growth if we're going to expand this over the next few years. So it is important, and we'll have that in place.
Thank you. Next, is there anyone else? We have 18 public comments.
Yes, Mayor. Do you want to start?
Mayor, I would like to speak, but I'll defer to the speakers that are in the queue, and then I'd like to share my comments with my colleagues and ask my question.
Okay. Anyone else before we turn to public comment? 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. Kat Ross, followed by Yadi, followed by Marla Tosher. Ms. Ross, you have
Hi.
2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to start by saying that I was born in Pasadena. I'm representing Showing Up for Racial Justice, and I want to talk about what other people are saying about ShotSpotter. The AP and the ACLU both say that the evidence is not objective. The audio gets sent to human analysts who change their judgments about whether the shot was fired, how many shots were fired, from what kind of weapon, based on the request of law enforcement after the fact. The ACLU says that it's not effective. A number of cities have stopped using it after determining it creates too many false positives and false negatives. In Chicago, 88% of alerts found no incidents involving a gun. Maybe you don't trust Chicago's reporting. This is similar to what San Diego police say in their own PowerPoint statistics. Of all the alerts in a 2-year period, only 15% were connected to gun-related crimes. The ACLU says that when it sends police on all of these false alarms, it results in more officers' stops and pat-downs in the areas that it's used. So the effect is that it increases racial profiling in those areas. Longitudinal studies over 17 years found in large metropolitan counties that it had no significant impact on firearm-related homicides or arrest outcomes.
20 seconds.
The city of Charlotte, North Carolina, installed in 2012 and then ended its contract shortly after, saying the technology did not help the police find anything new. And this is reinforced by Police Chief Magazine. So maybe you don't believe in the ACLU, maybe you do believe in Police Chief Magazine, which says that services like Shotspotter replace traditional calls for service and do so less efficiently and at greater monetary cost to the
Ms. Ross, your time has expired.
I didn't.
Oh.
Ms. Ross, if you could wrap up your comments, your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
The next speaker is Yadi, followed by Marla Tosher. Anne Marie Nee is not in the Zoom meeting as yet. So Yadi, go ahead.
Yes, gun violence is harmful and requires multifaceted solutions. Shotspotter is expensive, unproven, and a drain on city resources. The speaker before me quoted Police Chief Magazine saying that the results are very tepid and the cost is really high and taxpayers were going to be questioning the logic behind the expense. The DOJ and Redwood City conducted a field evaluation of Shotspotter that included a survey of 27 police officers on the effectiveness in Shotspotter, and 100% said that Shotspotter would not increase the likelihood that a victim of a shooting will survive. 92% said that Shotspotter will not increase the likelihood that someone would be arrested, and 88% said that Shotspotter will not make them more effective when handling shot-fired incidents. In another field evaluation with San Bernardino County Sheriff, a patrol deputy said the system missed an officer-involved shooting, and after that, the guys lost confidence. I submitted a comment with more of those kind of quotes from law enforcement. In a 7-city sample using Shotspotter, false alarm rates ranged from 51 to 88%. False alarms are so problematic and resource intensive that Pasadena PD in 2000 reported, quote, unnecessary calls for service due to false burglar alarms have grown into a tremendous problem. Alarms serve as a useful deterrent to crime. However, the amount of resources Pasadena police spends responding to false alarm calls every year has become intolerable.
30 seconds.
Has struggled with false alarms for the past several years and are draining patrol resources and creating a significant backlog. Furthermore, Shotspotter itself admits that it's not useful when someone is shot with a silencer close to the ground, at close range, in a car, indoors, or with ambient noises. What is the rush? Involve Community Police Oversight Commission, put out a bid. Let's put resources to proactively address the underlying issues. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next.
Marla Tosher. Ms. Tosher.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Marla Tauscher. So Lieutenant Grisoff was asked to come back with answers to a lot of questions. And frankly, I didn't hear a single answer to any of the questions that were posed to him during the Public Safety Committee meeting or subsequently in a series of letters. The one factoid that he did mention, though, that was fascinating is that no one else in LA County is using this technology. That means that 87 cities in LA County have passed on this technology. If that's not a red flag, I'm not really sure what is. I need to correct some inaccuracies in some of the statements as well. Outgoing city manager Steve Mermel really tried to downplay the court admissibility of evidence aspect of this, but that really contradicts the company's own statements. It devoted a good 2/3 of its press release to the admissibility of its evidence, the reliability, and the accuracy. So it's ridiculous to try to downplay that. Also, in this case, you really can't shoot the messenger like you've been trying to do all along, because I'm using the company's own words. You know, their product is dismal by their own admission. In the 20 years, they've been in business for more than 20 years, and they say that they've had 190 cases in which their court admissible forensic reports were admitted. 190 cases in 20 years over 20 states. That's failure. That's insane. I mean, if this stuff isn't used for evidence, what is it for? They also mentioned that they've survived some court challenges, 11 court challenges in those 20 years to the reliability of their evidence. How many times has their stuff been challenged and not
25 seconds.
up to court muster? Also, they mentioned in their press release, first of all, I have to correct, Lieutenant Grassoff said that they had contracted an independent study. It was not. They hired Edgewood and paid them money. That was not an independent study. Another thing they revealed in their press release is that this technology does not only works outdoors, it doesn't work indoors or in cars, which is a substantial limitation. But how does it work in like backyards with cinder block walls? How about fencing? How about any kinds of structures between buildings?
Ms. Tosher, your time has expired.
Okay.
Thank you. Anne-Marie Nee is not available, so we'll move on to Thomas Connor.
Hello?
Go ahead, Mr. Connor. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm here in opposition to Shotspotter, and limiting us to 2 minutes each while giving the PPD 40. Couldn't you have let us have an advocate to speak in equality in the council chambers? But trimming my notes, Shotspotter analyst Paul Green testified under oath that their marketing claims, which the PPD relies on, were not backed by data. From independent scientific research, however, from Doucette et al., quote, Shotspotter technology has no significant impact on firearm-related homicides or arrest outcomes. Likewise, Mayer and Blackburn, GDT, gunshot detection technology, has no impact on the level of reported gun crimes. Goldenberg et al., on how well GDT works to save gunshot victims. There's no differences in patient outcomes due to GDT. And Ratcliffe et al. Found that introducing acoustic gunshot detection systems led to a massive increase in unfounded incidents, but no significant increase in founded incidents, both relative to controls. And I'd like to dwell on that last point briefly, as well as in the case of Michael Williams, where police were sent a mile away from where Shotspotter eventually determined a gunshot had occurred. I've lived in Pasadena for a while now, but at one time I lived in Cleveland, Ohio. In 2014, there was someone else who lived in Cleveland, a kid. One gray Sunday in November, he went to the park, the one across the street from his elementary school. The park with a sign, the long gone community policing program, the one that had been cut to pay for new police weapons and equipment. Someone that they called the cops, incorrectly saying he had a gun.
30 seconds.
Cop, told by dispatch that this was a code 1, showed up hot. And before their car came to a stop, they had shot poor young Tamir Rice dead. I understand that you want to do everything you can to protect the people of this city, but that protection goes 2 ways. And a system that wrongfully tells police that someone is shooting a gun is going to lead to them showing up hot and killing an innocent citizen who is just trying to be alive. Please do not bring this flawed technology into our city.
Thank you. Anne-Marie Nee is still not in the meeting. Neither is Kate Dolan Mayer. I'll call their names one more time. We'll move on to Vincent DiStefano, followed by Heavenly Hughes. Mr. DiStefano.
Thank you, council members. I'd like to address something that Councilman Hampton asked my partner at Pasadena Private Security and CEQA, Chris Hockerhauser, at the public safety meeting. He said, Ms. Hockerhauser, if you didn't use this technology, which technology would you use? Ronald Reagan once said that the answers to complex issues are never easy.
I'm sorry, that was not my statement. My question to Mrs. Okerhauser was, could you bring us a list of technologies that
Fair enough, Councilman.
so
Hampton.
I just asked for a list of things, so I think I just want to make sure.
That's quite all right, and I stand corrected. My point here is that the assumption that there is a technological fix is what Ronald Reagan said when answers are never easy, but we can make them simple. My heart goes out to the communities that are most affected by the violence. But I think assuming that a system can solve it, rather than the long process that Councilman Kennedy, I think, correctly addressed at that same public safety meeting about engagement to reduce the temperature of the city, is a dramatically better use of our precious funds during a once-in-a-lifetime health crisis and a homeless crisis that is at epic proportions. The money could be better spent elsewhere, regardless of where it comes from. Thank you very much.
Before we move to the next speaker, let me just, given the hour and we still have closed session, we're going to move the PPR. So any member of the public, and there have been questions, or I'm sorry, cards submitted for the PPR. So members of the public should know that the PPR will be moved off to our next agenda on the city council, as will the leaf blower ordinance, in consultation with Ms. Williams and others and the city manager. We'll put the leaf blower ordinance under old business.
So leaf blowers will come back on September 18th under old business. October, I keep saying September.
So members of the public shouldn't understand who are interested in either one of those subjects, that they'll come back at our next meeting under old, well, the leaf blower under old business, the PPR, as it appears today. Thank you.
So we'll move on to Heavenly Hughes, followed by Carolyn Galoni. Ms. Hughes, can you unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. 2 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Heavenly Hughes. I'm the co-founder of My Tribe Rise. I would like to thank Kat from showing up for racial justice, and I echo all the statements regarding this Shotspotter stated thus far. Steve Mermel and Chief Perez are retiring due to at a time when the community is disgusted by their lack of action of public safety. But now we hear them recommending a Shotspotter that the community is not in agreement with. I would like to know, has the Pasadena police went out and canvassed the community and asked them, do we want that in our community? Do we see a need for it? I would also like to know exactly what areas will you all target or place these Shotspotters? And from listening, it seems like those few seconds of in the presentation of showing that a few shots was fired in this area for $640,000, it just doesn't add up. It seems like you all need to do more community engagement, because you guys are saying that the community might not call in and that the community don't know exactly what's going on, but the community does call in. The community is concerned about the public safety. And the problem is that in certain areas, you guys just don't respond.
25 seconds.
I'm also wondering, will these Shotspotters help in a situation like in the murder of Anthony McLean? Will it let us know about those shots being fired and be able to collect evidence and be able to get witnesses and be able to prosecute people? Because that's the type of public safety that the community has been addressing, and the city council continues to not hold police accountable, continues to not respond to what the community
Ms.
is
Hughes,
talking about.
your time has expired.
I'm sorry?
Your time has expired.
Thank you, city council.
Thank you. Carolyn Galoni. We have Larry Deadario, who's not checked in, and Sarah Brewer Boland, who's not checked in. And so we can go to Mohammed Tosher after Carolyn Galoni. Ms. Galoni,
Hi.
2 minutes,
Yes,
go
hi.
ahead, starting now.
Okay. I just want to say there have been some wonderful speakers to touch on a lot of the points that I would like to make. I honestly don't know how Shotspotter really came to the attention or the desire of PPD, but if it is because if you are like constantly, as any good organization would, seeking to increase public safety and reduce crime, then please go and seek those programs that are proven to do this, to increase public safety and decrease crime. Technology does neither of those things. Technology, they can capture shots, but that's not decreasing crime or improving safety. There are programs throughout Los Angeles that do this, that have a proven record. And we can also do this through prevention, through jobs, housing, and other prevention programs. It doesn't make sense to go to a technology when what we're trying to do is make our communities better, to make things more safe. And the way to do that is through reducing stress, through reducing harm to our communities, and uplifting our communities. I'm not surprised that the police chief is recommending this. I don't think over-policing is our police chief's concern. He's not even concerned about the numerous complaints that have come out of Northwest Pasadena about over-policing, that the community talks about this.
30
about
seconds.
The and the deaths of people in there. I also wanted to touch base on the fact that we heard this long presentation by someone that's supporting Shotspotter, but we didn't hear a long presentation by people who are arguing against it. You can't just have one biased presentation and make a decision. Then you already made a decision by only having one presenter. Also, Steve Mermel says, we all get a gunshot, and now this all it does is get gunshots, and then we know where to go. But
Ms. Galoni, your time has expired. Can you wrap up?
Will arrive with their guns blazing to go. We've already killed Black men in Pasadena. We don't need them to go after with their guns blazing when it's a backfire, or even when there's a shot fired.
Ms. Galoni, thank you. Mohammed Tajsar, followed by Mike Katz-Lakabe. Mr. Tajsar?
Okay, thank you. Just a quick point, Mr. DeStefano can take Mr. Deodario's statement. My name is Mohammed Tajsar. I'm a District 1 resident, and I represent the ACLU of Southern California. So this weekend, I submitted a letter on behalf of 9 different organizations, strongly urging this body not to acquire Shotspotter. I want to make 2 quick points, one procedural and one substantive. The city manager, Mr. Grisave's presentations were grossly misleading, right? I work at the ACLU. There was no ACLU study or support for this technology. There are many other examples of misstatements in the presentation. It just goes to show that this council really needs to hear from opposing voices to police department acquisitions. You have experts in the community who study these items, who oppose them, who never have anything more than 2 minutes to share and discuss what they learned, right? So beyond this item, I urge you, I'm pleading with you to agendize community members in these discussions that are independent of staff, independent of the PD, who can provide you with a diversity of viewpoints, right? On substantively, I'll be really frank, council members, this proposed acquisition is extraordinarily troubling, right? It's an exercise in hubris and disregard for the community. Hubris because it suggests that somehow, somewhere, our city is going to be different from the experience of millions of people across the country who have had to live through the deployment of Shotspotter, an experience which teaches us that the technology is unreliable, racially discriminatory, and creates rather than resolves dangerous encounters in our city, right? You don't have to believe me, just Google it, right? That's my message, Google it, right? you'll see that the only entities who have anything positive to say about ShotSpotter are the companies, is the company itself, the people the company pays, and the police departments who like shiny new toys, right? Further,
30
why do we
seconds.
think we can't use 600 grand to actually support people's lives? There are no inspector generals that say it's bad to provide more counseling to young people. No inspector generals that say after school programs are a waste of money. There are no academics that say people who experience homelessness shouldn't get food or shelter. And yet here we are asking for 640 grand to adopt a controversial, problematic, and harmful surveillance technology. What are we doing here, right? Join us, join the ACLU, CCOP, My Tribe Rise, Indivisible, the IMA, the NAACP, POP, Pasadena Privacy for All, Surge, and a bunch of other community members, and show some courage. Say no, say no, we don't need this.
Mr.
Thank you.
Char, thank you. Mike Katz-Lacabe, followed by Adriana Batista, followed by Chris Ogershauser.
Good evening. My name is Mike Katz-Lacabe with the Center for Human Rights and Privacy. I think it was great that the City Council took additional time to allow for more research on the contract. However, it's unclear where the additional data came from, but it appears to have been directly from ShotSpotter. The presentation claims that ShotSpotter improves the reporting of shooting incidents and reduces the number of reported shootings. Where is the data that supports those claims? ShotSpotter is the perfect tool that garners the support of police and elected officials. Police support it because it ensures that they will always have an argument for additional staffing as they respond to an influx of alerts from ShotSpotter where no evidence of a shooting is found. In addition, elected officials get the benefit of appearing to do something about crime without any real independent evidence that the technology is effective. A few years ago, Oakland Police Chief Sean Went wanted to cancel the contract with ShotSpotter because of its ineffectiveness, but was overruled by the City Council. Charlotte-Mecklenburg is one of a number of cities that has ended its contract because the system didn't help them make arrests or identify crime victims. People seem surprised that Chicago reviewed the ShotSpotter contract despite a lack of evidence that was effective. In fact, the city of San Pablo recently renewed its contract with ShotSpotter despite a consistent increase in ShotSpotter activations, which, if ShotSpotter is accurate, means that gunfire has increased 66% from 2016 to 2020 while ShotSpotter has been there. It's not surprising that police departments using ShotSpotter have positive views of ShotSpotter because it's mostly based on anecdotes. One should note, too, that ShotSpotter is a funder of New York University's policing project and take that into consideration.
30 seconds.
Your time, I encourage you to vote no on this item.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. Adriana Batista, followed by Chris Ogershauser, followed by Florence Anang. Ms. Batista, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
The staff report is signed off by Chief Perez. We all know Perez will say whatever is needed to get what he wants, even in spite of the facts. Why are we listening to Perez and the salespeople who have clearly won over PPD staff, including Mr. Grassoff, over the advice of a client's tried and true and unsatisfied reviews? The Chicago Police Department and the ACLU? Grassoff is trying to sell this faulty system. Meanwhile, Chicago PD is warning police departments around the nation of this fraudulent technology. Also, you want to increase PPD's response time to shooting alerts. You need to evaluate if the staff is even prepared to handle that. With the shootings and killings of Anthony McLean, Kendrick McDade, Maurice Clark, Leroy Barnes, and killing of J.R. Thomas, we can see that PPD still has an unaddressed history of addressing false reports and even calls for help with fatal violence. As you could see from Mr. Grassoff's report, the area they are targeting is Northwest Pasadena, where many residents are people of color who are already disproportionately pulled over and targeted by police. City Council, you have no problem approving technology when you pay more attention to the salespeople, who, by the way, were not even done in an open proposal.
30
A simple
seconds.
online showed me that there are definitely competitors. However, the same concern remains. This could be giving PPD a blank check to steal more lives. There needs to be a more thorough investigation into Pasadena PD's illegal sales of firearms to the community. Lieutenant Vaskin Gordikian was sentenced for illegally selling 108 guns. As a high-ranking lieutenant, there must have been more people working with him, and it's reflective of a company culture. So how many cops did it take to let this happen? And how can we be sure illegal gun sales by PPD aren't occurring anymore?
Ms. Batista,
Especially
your time has expired.
They somehow know there are hundreds of guns still available to be seized.
Thank you. Chris Okershauser, followed by Florence Anong, followed by Anne Marie Nee, who just checked into the meeting. Ms. Okershauser?
Yes, hello, good evening.
Go ahead.
I'd like to agree with the previous speakers who have made the comments about numerous analyses of the Shotspotters technology have called into question its effectiveness. Also, the deployment of Shotspotters has led to harms in the communities it was supposed to help. And also the position that Shotspotters will increase presence of police in Northwest Pasadena, already over-policed and ineffectively served. It will result in more risks, frisks, contacts, detentions, seizures, and arrests, none of which will effectively deter violence in the area. Lastly, I'd like to make note of a position that the ACLU National has made about gunshot detectors like Shotspotter, in which they say, while gunshot detectors have a useful law enforcement application, concerns arise from what the devices actually are, microphones that can be used to listen in on a community remotely. If limited solely to detecting and reporting on the locations of gunshots, the devices are not problematic. However, if these secretly operated microphones can be remotely activated and used to listen in on communities in which they are placed, they can represent another form of general mass surveillance.
30 seconds.
Only with strict limitations and auditing can we be sure this technology is not abused, and such oversight commonly does not exist. And I would suggest that the level of community trust, as expressed in the previous speaker, and noting both the Anthony McLean and the meeting of Chris Malou show how much trust I think that the community has, that the police department and the city have their best interest at heart.
Ms. Okershauser, thank you. Florence Anong, followed by Anne Marie Nee, followed by Hiram Cormier Jr. Ms. Anong, *6 to unmute. There you go. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. A spokesperson for the LAPD said the technology has also been used by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in the City of Industry, Linwood, and Willowbrook area, but is not currently in use in part because of finances. It's going to cost us a lot of money, and that's something we have to address. Notice none of those areas said Compton or Inglewood or any of the other areas, because all of those communities rejected it absolutely when the council came to the community and they said no. But let's go back. Can Shotspotter stop the deaths that happened at the beginning of this year? The 3 Hispanic men that died, the young boy that was fatally hurt? Could it stop? No. But what it could do was to maybe help the police get there quickly and find the people. So what it's really doing is really making it look good for the police. So they can say, yes, we caught the person maybe in one day, caught the person at the crime. That's excellent, but the death still happened. Number 3 for me is the listening device. It's a listening device, everybody. It listens to inside the community. And just like in court cases, some of the court cases that the police tried to put in had to be thrown out because a voice was heard and a name was spoken of and the police wanted to use it. So 24 hours a day, this technology is being used all over. Now, number 4,
30 seconds.
What technology can do. Technology failed in us today with Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp going down for over 6 hours. So if technology goes down for Showstopper, what do the police do? Do they stop becoming police, Or do they, if there's shots fired, they still have to go out there and kind of do their job, which they do their job. And my last point is that I suggest that if this is supposed to happen in the Northwest area, why doesn't every council member say, you know what, I'll put my money where my mouth is and I will vote for this, and we'll have it in all of the districts for 1 year, and let's see
Ms.
if we can
Anang.
listen to the white areas, the Asian areas, and all of the other areas while we're listening to the black and brown areas. So I think that might be a fair thing.
Ms. Anang, your time has expired.
$144,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne Marie Nee, followed by Hiram Cormier Jr., followed by Michelle White. Ms. Nee, go ahead.
Thank-
2
Hello,
minutes.
thank you very much for this opportunity to talk. I want to thank my fellow neighbors who have informed themselves and brought their, in many cases, informed expertise to the group. The gentleman who spoke from the ACLU, I thank you very much. I think you made a very important point that if we really wanted to know if this was the right way to go, we could just read the reviews, the tried and tested reviews going back years to show that other communities have found this to not be a helpful resource, a helpful tool when it comes to actually improving public safety. And as a neighbor, it means a lot to me to look at the data, to learn from other communities what actually improves public safety. Where should we be investing our money to improve public safety? And over-policing, having a higher police presence, is going to do the opposite. Thank you very much for this time.
Thank you. Hiram Cormier Jr., followed by Michelle White.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you. Two minutes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I speak on behalf of myself and only myself, but yo, this is the most, out of all the meetings I've been to, this has been the most anti-Black out of all of them, and all of them are. But somebody said that this is only a listening device. It's not only a listening device, it's a criminalization device. It's a device to put someone in jail. I don't understand how Vermel could sit up here and say that it only tells them where the shooting is happening and the direction that it's giving that the shooting is occurring in. That's not true. First of all, you know that the cops will show up and they will arrest anybody. They do not give a fuck who they get as long as they get someone. This shit is so dangerous. Somebody talked about how this was basically a similar device that got Samir Rice killed. I'm sure there's other shootings that have occurred, police shootings that have happened as a result of this. It gives out wrong information. If I go outside and drop a fucking pan, all of a sudden there could be a police presence. That is some bullshit. It doesn't work. As other callers have noted, bro, like, it's not reliable. If you look at independent studies, actual independent studies, everybody's saying it doesn't fucking work. It should tell you something that out of all the fucking cities in LA.
Mr. Cormier, I'm going to ask you to please be more respectful as you address the
I'm
council
going to
and the
ask
community.
you to be more
Thank you.
respectful of our lives and not put this in our communities so that people can get life sentences off of this.
Thank you.
I know people from Pasadena who are serving life over some shit like this. Please stop it. We do not want this.
Please
We don't want
complete
it
your
in
comments,
Northwest.
Mr.
We don't want
Cormier.
it nowhere else. Fuck you, nigga. Punk ass motherfucker, man. Y'all some bitch.
Michelle White. Michelle, can you unmute? There you
How
go.
about now?
We got it. Thank you. Go. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. I live in District 5, a half a block from Villa Park, and in 91101. This is an area where we've had shots fired in the past, and we're the most over-policed area in the city. And I didn't hear any need for the shots
spotter because in our community, when shots go out, we call the police, and the police are there in very short order. There's no question about that. Now, that may be because we're so over-policed and they're right there anyway, but we don't need to have another way of finding out that a shot has been fired because it's very clear, and both the police and the community know right away, and it's called in. I'm confused by something that happened about 3 years ago when it was this shot spotter was considered for the first time. My remembrance was that Chief Perez was very complimentary of how many neighbors call in. If that's the case, I don't see the need for shot spotters. So
30 seconds.
one thing. Okay, I'm wondering what happened with the Oversight Commission. Did they consider this at all? And we have a policy of competitive bidding. I don't know why this is not part of that process. And it seems to me that a 3-year test period is incredibly long. We should do something about, if we're going to do this, we should make it a much shorter period of time. We've raised a lot of questions about this use of software, and I think more time needs to be put into actually checking out the efficacy and reliability of this product. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't see Kate Dolenmayer or Larry Diodario or Sarah Brewer Bolin. Who is? Larry? Larry Diodario? Go ahead. Mr. Diodario, could you unmute and then you could start your public comment?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. 2 minutes. Go
Thank
ahead.
you very much. I'd just like to make a couple of procedural points. First, contrary to the way this item is worded on the agenda, the council members who are not at the Public Safety Committee, 5 of you, should know that this does not come to the council as a recommendation of the Public Safety Committee. It is a proposal by the police department. It was discussed by the committee at their September 23rd meeting. After a presentation by the police department, there was a consensus of the committee that the proposal be moved forward to the full council, and so you have it before you. But there was never a motion, much less a vote, to the effect that approval by the council is recommended by the committee. I wouldn't want the council to think that this matter has been thoroughly vetted by the committee and need not be subject to high scrutiny by the council. Such scrutiny is needed by the full council, and the public expects it. Secondly, you cannot possibly approve the proposed purchase today because it has not been through the competitive bidding process required by the city charter. The agenda says, quote, competitive bidding is not required pursuant to city charter section 1002F for contracts for professional and unique services, but that statement is completely wrong. The proposed contract is neither for professional services, nor is it a service unique to Pasadena, so the exemption does not apply, nor do any of the other exemptions listed in section 1002 apply. There's a statement in the staff report that says, quote, staff is not aware of any other vendor providing this service, unquote, but their lack of awareness does not satisfy the requirement. In fact, there are multiple other companies who have gunshot detection systems and who are potential bidders on a contract like this.
20 seconds.
The proposal also requests that the council grant an exemption to the competitive selection process under the power given to it by Municipal Code Section 4.08.049B. It seems to me that that section of the code should be invalid because it effectively amends the city charter without a vote of the people. Nevertheless, if it happens to be valid, it still requires the council to find that a sole source contract with Shotspotter is in the quote, best interest of the city, unquote. You cannot, in good conscience, make such a finding in view of the existence of other potential bidders and in view of the city's lack of due diligence.
Mr. Diodario, your time has expired.
Okay, therefore you cannot approve the purchase until the competitive bidding process has played out and until you know a lot more about what you are buying. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes public comment on this item.
Thank you. In terms of, oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Kennedy, you're in the queue, so we'll let you ask your questions and make any comments. Then I have some questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, about 4 or 5 years ago, at the urging of someone who had much more knowledge about this technology than I did at the time, I brought this matter to the fore, and the city manager and police staff reviewed it. And they did not recommend going forward with it. I thought I had done what I needed to do as a responsible member of the city council, seeking innovative ways to address crime. City manager at that time was, if I have this correctly, was Steve Mermel. The police chief may have been a different person, but the outcome was this was not a type of technology that we needed for Pasadena. So you may ask the question, what has happened? What has happened is that there's been an uptick in gun-related violence in our community, and we all have a sense of the following. We've got to do something to arrest the violence and the use of firearms in our community. But I'm still unconvinced that spot shotter is the right technology. Even with the answers in the articulate presentation by Lieutenant Grisafi doing his job. So, Charlotte, North Carolina, city of about 800,000 in the city, the area, the metropolitan area, well over 1 million, employed this technology and decided that there was a better use of funds. City that's almost 10 times, but at least 9 times larger than the city of Pasadena, with 4 or 5 Fortune 500 companies. And they simply said, it's not for us. They've tried it out. Now, in Southern California, ladies and gentlemen, 87 cities with police departments or contracted relationships with other agencies to provide police services. They've said no. They said no, not for us. Now, why? Because the technology itself may do what it purports to do, say it's going to do, and that is identify within a 82-foot radius a location of where the shot was fired. But even with that data, it has been extremely difficult for law enforcement to do their job. Now, law enforcement is right before us.
Mr. Kennedy, if I can just, we were still in the question asking phase. And so, you know, I don't want to interrupt you, but if you have,
okay,
yeah.
That's fair, Mayor. That's fair. I have some questions then.
Thank you.
As the
Mayor.
technology, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor, I just think that if Councilmember Kennedy is a statement, you know, to not prolong the meeting and have come back again, it's probably best for him to finish his statement.
Go ahead and finish, Mr. Kennedy, and then that'll be
No, I'll ask the questions out of deference to. the
Well,
mayor,
but
I
go ahead
appreciate
and
council
you're well into it, and so go ahead and finish, and then we can ask questions. Go
Well,
ahead.
Let me just say for the record that I appreciate Councilmember Hampton's and the mayor's comments related to my passion around this issue. Whatever we do, I want to make sure we get it right. Hasn't the technology, Lieutenant Grisafi, in a number of jurisdictions, not aided law enforcement agency in doing what it purports that it will do?
Just so I'm clear, can you repeat the question, Mr. Kennedy? I'm not sure Mr. Grisafi, do you understand the question?
I think I do,
Okay.
Councilmember. I think the question is it effective? Is it an effective piece of equipment? And I think there's a number of cities that have reported its effectiveness in reducing crime. As a matter of fact, you mentioned Charlotte, North Carolina. Its neighbor to the east in Greenville, North Carolina, reports a 33% reduction within the first year of them installing the equipment. I mentioned the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania incident where 13 individuals who were shot. The only reason that the fire department and or paramedics and police could respond was based on the notification from Shotspotter. So yes, I think there are. I think that San Francisco Police Department reports only 85%, I'm sorry, only 15% of shootings or shot fire calls are reported to the police department. That's 85% of calls are never reported to the police department. The only reason they get that information is from Shotspotter. So yes, I think that it is an effective piece of equipment. I think that it would help us. And again, this is not the only evidence that we are using. This is only a piece of the puzzle. This along with forensic evidence, interviews, detectives' investigation, all these pieces of the puzzle come together to solve these crimes.
Could the implementation of this technology make the community more unsafe rather than safe in a rush to tell the community we are doing all we can to address the illegal discharge of firearms within a small geographic boundary?
Again, I think the answer is yes. As mentioned in the meeting that Councilmember Rivas had with her community members, it was quite clear that they want not only this technology, they want additional technology to prevent these. These are the community members that are most impacted by the gunfire.
Speaking of boundaries, the implementation of Shotspotter is as proposed, is in a mostly minority populated area of the city that has been stigmatized in some circles already. Doesn't this further stigmatize the neighborhood, the community, the geographic area with this technology?
So this technology merely detects and alerts law enforcement to gunshots. That's it. The data that we provided is in a particular area that's people of color. But it makes sense to me, it's logical to me that if we can use and leverage this technology to minimize the shots in this particular area, we owe that to the community members to do that, to prevent future shootings. And as when talking to other agencies who are using this, they all said initially we had an increase in gunshots, likely because they're now being detected and that they're being alerted to the gunshots. Eventually, though, as the system continued, those shootings decreased. And again, I don't have scientific information as to why that is, but I would likely suggest that it's because of the deterrent aspect.
We really, Lieutenant Grisafi, want to rest on the empirical data and not the anecdotal. So how do you answer the question that the use of this technology, as one speaker said, our police officers are going in hot? And someone gave a reference to Tamir Rice, but isn't this potentially a very dangerous situation that we're going in, meaning our police officers are going in with not adequate information?
Actually, the information that they're providing us, or that they provide law enforcement officers, is more information than we generally get. The fact that they're telling us how many shooters are involved, what direction of travel, is it a fully automatic weapon? That's more information than we generally get. And I don't think that responding to an alert by Shotspotter, our tactical approach is really not anything different than if we were responding to a 911 call with shots fired. Either way, we're going to approach with caution. We're going to approach with the tactical sense that the officers don't get injured.
With minor exception, Lieutenant Grisafi, in my 60 years in Pasadena, with minor exception, Adena Street, Allen in the freeway, very bad actors. Most of the officer-involved shootings have been minorities, and that we can quickly solve that issue. And I'm also not convinced that we are not labeling a section of community. Is there any conversation, if the council were to implement this technology, that you would implement it citywide?
I think that if there's a need to implement it citywide, then I think that the council would likely take a look at that. At this point, with the data that was provided, this is the community, the 3 square mile area that was selected or that was proposed by ShotSpotter is the most impacted area from gun violence. And that's where the city would best be served by placing the sensors or the system in that 3 square mile area.
And Councilmember Kennedy, I would add that in the wake of shootings at Villa Park, gunfire on Raymond, incidents on Navarro, when I go out with the police department and we're joined with the mayor and other members of the council, I see the diversity that makes our city great. I see people from every walk of life, every race. We have a tremendously diverse community. The one thing they have in common is they're all fearful of crime in their city. They're fearful that they or their loved ones may become victim to random gun violence. Again, there is some fair criticism leveled at ShotSpotter. It's not the end all and be all. It is otherwise, it's there in the background. People don't know it's there until there's an activation. When it's activated, it alerts the police and they respond. The reason I brought it forward at this time, along with the chief, is that given the increase in activity in our community involving gun violence, it seemed like something that's worth a try. It is not to the exclusion of all the other good things that people have suggested: enhanced community engagement, dealing with the underlying root causes of crime. It's just simply a tool that we think the city of Pasadena ought to try to make our own assessment. The proof will be in the pudding. And so the recommendation is that we try it. And if it doesn't help, well, then we'll drop it, like some cities have done. But clearly others are finding it useful. And I think it's something worthy of the council's consideration. Thank you.
I don't think any city across this country where ShotSpotter has been implemented has actually seen greater arrest record for the potential crime or the crime that has been committed. And until that issue can empirically be shown, I don't believe this council would be wise to adopt this technology. When was discussed previously, there's nothing that has changed from today. This is a rush answer, a serious issue in our community called gun violence and shots fired. But this is not the technology that solves that issue. It is what the city manager said is a tool, but that tool can go awry very quickly by labeling sections of our community. I am very much surprised that the Board of Realtors are not a part of this discussion, given the impact that this could potentially have on livability and how people view Northwest Pasadena. We worked very hard, including Council Member Gordo, now Mayor Gordo, to ensure that any negative connotations, denotations about Northwest Pasadena would be removed. And what we both saw, Council Member Gordo, now Mayor Gordo, is we saw a leveling and an upward tick in home values in the areas that we represented. And this would tell the world that there's a problem with these areas. But actually, in terms of shots fired, it exists all across the city. Now, $650,000, what would be a better use of $650,000 for my council colleagues? I'll tell you. You could use that money to incentivize people to help you in terms of law enforcement, bring people to justice. But ShotSpotter is not going to do that. It just simply is not. And a lot of the information that has been provided is anecdotal, not empirical. So why not slow the process down a bit, allow our police commission and police auditor in conjunction with the police department to take a thorough look at the technology, as opposed to giving us all a sense of, we've got to do something. That's not good enough. And $650,000 right now could be better spent if we're serious about crime solving by engaging the community and helping in that process. Those are my comments, Mayor. To my colleagues, Mayor, I would simply say we're moving too fast. It's a rush to find a solution, and it's not the right solution. And staff is asking us to let it play out and see if it's effective. I'm telling you, that is not the best way to go about having an appreciable impact on gun-involved crime. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Let me just say that before I turn to I think Mr. Madison than Ms. Rivas. Nothing stigmatizes any community more than shootings and shootings that go unsolved. And, this is not a solution. We all understand that. This is a tool that is intended to capture people, yes, who fire a gun in a neighborhood or anywhere in our city unsafely and illegally. The issue of outreach, Lieutenant or Chief Perez, how many if you know offhand, just an estimate of these shootings are perpetrated by people who don't even live in our city? Would you say that there's a fair number of shootings perpetrated by people who don't even live in our city? I don't know how we'd outreach to them.
Yeah, there is a fair number. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but there are incidents of shootings that occur with visitors to Pasadena.
People who come to our city.
Yes.
Specifically, in some instances, to commit these crimes in our city. And that, I would say to you, is more of a stigma than any technology that we might employ that would help to capture the perpetrators of these crimes. And let me tell you something. I believe every member of this council wants those individuals to be caught, be prosecuted, and if proven to be guilty, incarcerated. Because it's not okay. It's not acceptable to fire a weapon within our city unlawfully and unsafely. And anyone who says different, I disagree with, and I believe that every member of this council disagrees with. I would hope. Mr. Madison?
Thank you, Mayor. I've really appreciated the discussion and certainly appreciate Councilmember Kennedy's comments. I guess my questions for Lieutenant Grisafi are, the department wants to give this a try, as it were. Is that fair to say? Yes,
that's the intent.
And, we get, as the council all knows, I don't know how widely known this is, but we get noteworthy reports from the department about significant, police activity or public safety issues. And there are just so many shootings in our community. And so it's our duty, it's our obligation to try to address that, because it's terribly degrading and for the community. And I have to confess, it seems kind of creepy, that there's this equipment that's listening. So, is there any credence to the idea that there's some surveillance or some listening to conversations or anything like that?
No, this is not a surveillance piece of equipment. These sensors only pick up loud, explosive type sounds, voices. In order for it to trigger the microphones to start recording, and there has to be a minimum of 3 different sensors have to pick up the sound. So, and there are, there are anywhere about 20 to 25 sensors put up in the 1 square mile. So we're looking at about 3 square miles, we're looking at about 75 sensors that will be installed. They have to, each sensor, if somebody were to talk, they would have to talk loud enough for 3 different sensors to have to pick up the voices in order for it to start recording. However, once the computer or the software gets that alert, it will automatically filter it out and not even notify either the police department or its review center, the Shotspotter's review center, because it recognizes that it's not an explosive concussion type sound that would generate, it would basically be filtered out by the software.
Thank you. And then is there anything, are we bound for the entire 3 years financially?
No,
is it possible?
We have an opt-out option.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So in a year, if we're having really unexpected, consequences or experiences, and it's not efficacious in doing what we want to do, which is disrupt shootings and people being shot in the community, we could reopen it and come back.
Yes, that is correct, sir.
This next question's hard. It's hard to talk about because it's a painful topic, I know, for a lot of people, and it may not be something that we're capable of knowing with any certainty. But what do you expect? Will there be more officer-involved shootings because of this technology, or less, or is this not a good predictor of that?
I researched that based on the questions that came up during public safety. There's no evidence that suggests that it's going to increase officer-involved shootings. It's going to increase a more tragic ending. There's no information that suggests that. Officers need to approach shooting situations, whether it comes in on 911 or it comes in on as an alert from Shotspotter. They need to approach with caution. They need to make sure both the community and the officers are safe. There's no data that suggests it, so I can't answer that. My personal feeling is no, it's not going to be an issue. They will, officers, when responding to alerts by Shotspotter, and this will be part of the training that will be given to officers. They will be trained just like an officer does all the time to look for signs, look for keys, for individuals who are out of place or are acting strangely. And those are the people that the officers are going to contact. They're not going to contact the woman who's pushing the baby stroller. They're generally not the ones involved in this type of activity.
Yeah, and I know we see a lot of reports, and sometimes we get immediate reports, even apart from the noteworthies, about particular automobiles that, as was mentioned, I think already, people from outside the city, this kind of activity, gang-related violence, knows no boundaries.
Right.
So. Okay, I think those are my questions. I mean, I had one more question, Lieutenant, and that is, somebody said, well, people will report and cooperate, but my experience is a little different, or my recollection is that, especially in a relatively small community like ours, it can be difficult to get cooperative witnesses where that level of violence is in play.
Yeah, you are accurate. You are correct on that. There are communities where people don't want to cooperate with law enforcement in their investigations. It's sad, but it is true. The good people of Pasadena will call us. They will call 911 and try to report as best as they can, but they don't have the accurate information. Like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes reports of gunfire come from a several block area, and it doesn't provide us with precise information. With Shotspotter, it provides us with an 82-foot radius so that we can go there. And if need be, and I mentioned this at public safety, there was an incident that I was, when I was a patrol sergeant, that we had a shooting. It was a very large area, and we didn't find the victim in the bushes for probably 10 to 12 minutes. Fortunately, he was okay, but had he been seriously injured, we could have started providing medical aid a lot quicker.
Yeah, I can't recall if we have this technology or not, but I'm aware of technology that from a helicopter, one can detect heat.
Yes.
And so if there's, as is sometimes the case, there's a shooting and a weapon is thrown from an automobile into ice plant or something, that's quite effective at detecting that.
It's very effective, yes, as long as they're a heat source.
Yeah, this seems similar to that in some respects. So, okay, I really appreciate the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. Ms. Rivas, followed by Councilmember Masuda.
Thank you, Mayor. I had one more question that perhaps the city attorney may be in the best position to answer. Several of the public commenters raised my main reservation about the technology, that being its admissibility in criminal cases. So on the one hand, it seems like it's an extremely helpful tool for a police department to have in its immediate response to shootings. It can point them in the right direction so they can get there more quickly. And that's got to be more accurate, I would think, than a person who just hears a gunshot and calls it in. I know when I hear gunshots from my house, I have no idea where it's coming from. But the question I keep asking myself, is that accurate enough that we would be comfortable having it used in criminal prosecutions? Because I think once we invite this technology into our city and that data does exist, it's not up to us how it's used. It's up to the district attorney's office whether they want to use it as evidence in a felony prosecution. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that point. Is my understanding correct?
I think if it did become evidence, it would be a question of whether a court would require expert testimony, something more. But I think what the lieutenant went through in terms of talking about how a ShotSpotter would learn about the information and pass it on to the police department. For the most part, it seems like where ShotSpotter technology is used, it's one piece to the larger puzzle. So the mere fact that officers responded to a ShotSpotter call might be all that might be needed for a case. So it may not, it only would come into play if there wasn't much else perhaps, and if there were a need to triangulate or look at the vehicle speed or look at other specific things that the technology had. But it seems like from the lieutenant's presentation, there oftentimes is a lot more evidence. So I think from my understanding, the department really is looking for this just as a tool and not to use the technology to ensure that it is guaranteed going to be admissible in every court case where they may make mention of it when they may file it with the prosecutor's office. So I don't know if the lieutenant may want to clarify that.
Yeah, that is accurate. His representation is accurate in the prosecution aspect. This information just overlays with the other information that we get during our investigation. We're not solely basing our arrests or prosecution merely on this evidence. There's a lot of other information that has to come into play.
So it'd essentially be what the current status quo is. We received a call of shots fired in this area and we responded essentially.
It depends. I mean, it depends on the investigation. A lot of information. I talked about the where and when of a shooting. We've had, although it's rare, we've had incidents where an individual was shot and we didn't learn about it until the next morning. That's concerning. Had we had the ShotSpotter, we would have known about it right then and there. However, what that did is that would have provided us the when and where we could have gone back and figured out a lot more to the case.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think we're all surprised sometimes to find out that a shooting occurred when a victim reports to Huntington Hospital, for example, and apparently was the victim of a gunshot, but nobody knew.
Right.
Or, in the worst case scenario where there's a victim, somewhere in the community that can't seek assistance or no one knows about. So there's that aspect of the technology as well. Mr. Masuda?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure glad you said that because that was going to be one of my questions, because victims go to the Huntington Hospital, for instance, and they don't want to share or tell what happened, and it's very concerning. Lieutenant Gustaffi, you heard from the community saying that the device is discriminatory and we're over policed, and I can understand that view because where you're going to have that device, but my real concern is when they say that it's not reliable and it's not a helping device to help public safety. What is your response to that?
I think any type of technology that we can leverage that helps us in investigations, that helps us with an individual who potentially is shot, to settle the nerves of community members whose house was struck with bullets. Anytime that we can do that, I think that it is, the technology is useful. The reality of it is, at times we don't get reports of shootings, and we're responding, or we don't respond. That's concerning to us. With this technology, we will be able to respond. We will be alerted to the fact that a shooting did occur. So, and this is, technology is merely listening for gunshots. It doesn't distinguish between races. It doesn't distinguish between who's the one shooting, who they're shooting at. It merely just detects sound, and that's it. And it provides that information to us.
In your opinion, then, when they say it's not reliable, do you think that they're talking about that it doesn't detect real shots?
I think
real shootings?
I think that there is clear evidence that suggests it is reliable. There's clear evidence that it does suggest that it's accurate. Are there some cities that don't agree with it? Yes, I understand that. But that's the purpose for the trial basis. It allows us the opportunity to try this in order to deter people from shooting and reduce gun violence in our city, in particularly impacted areas of our city.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Before we move on, let me say, given the hour and the need for a closed session, we're also going to put the campaign contribution matter off to our next agenda, so we can have time to have our closed session as well. Mr. Hampton?
Mayor, on that issue of the campaign contribution, it's just a quick vote. Can't we just take that vote real quick?
I don't know that it's a quick vote, Mr. Kennedy, and we have public comment for that as well. And I think, to be fair to the public commenters and to the community, we should just notify them that it's going to be put off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hampton?
Hello, Mayor. Thank you, Lieutenant Grissom. Thank you so much for the presentation. I thought it was an informative presentation. Also, I have a lot of respect for all of the public commenters that came in and had their opposition towards this type of technology. Can you guys hear me fine? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure you could. And, you know, I see this type of technology or this equipment as a, you know, kind of well, not kind of, but a quality of life, as well as a life-saving, potentially a life-saving piece of technology. The fire chief, who's unfortunately not here for this presentation today, he spoke at public safety, and instead of me paraphrasing him, I'll just ask the city manager to mention brief comments about what our fire chief said about Shotspotter, because he's in a city that actually has Shotspotter installed, or he was previously in the city that Shotspotter was installed in.
Yes, thank you, Council Member. Our chief, Fire Chief Chad Augustine, was previously with Sacramento Fire. Sacramento does have Shotspotter. Chief Augustine indicated that it was helpful in getting emergency medical staff to the scene of a victim in a quicker response time, again, because of its ability to locate where the shots occurred. And so he felt that it did contribute positively to meeting the needs of victims and very likely saving lives.
So that leads me to my question. My first question would be, because I do see this as a opportunity to get on the scene quicker. I mean, if anyone is shot, one of our neighbors or just an individual in our city is shot, does our fire department have access? Will they have access to this information as well.
Yeah, that is feasible. That's a good possibility that we could provide them with those alert system.
I think it would be great so that they're prepared in case that they need to get on scene soon.
The system allows for unlimited users, so that would be a good possibility.
Okay, and then let's see, I do see, and understand the concern from residents saying that, this is a lot of money and this money could be used in other ways to benefit our community. In what other ways could this money be used? Because this is not general fund, is it?
Councilmember, no. As mentioned, again, this comes from the Supplemental Law Enforcement Fund. So we are restricted in the use of that fund. It can generally go for law enforcement purposes. I thought I heard Councilmember Kennedy suggest that maybe it could be used to pay for information leading to arrests. That is perhaps one plausible use. I'm not certain, but it would need to go to a policing services use. So it's not something that the city council could say invest in recreation programming for youth or other services that are traditionally not provided by the police department.
Oh, thank you for that clarification. So how much is in that fund?
Kimberly Seaman from the police department is stepping forward, and I think she knows what the fund balance is.
The fund balance in that fund is 500,000.
So there's a $500,000 in that fund. Every year we get an allotment.
We get an allotment that this one is based off of sales tax. So depending on if we estimate, we've been getting about 360,000. We pay for an officer out of that fund. So depending on if we have vacancies is whether we add to the fund balance.
So probably about, after netting out the one officer we pay for out of that fund, probably about 200,000 roundabout net available annually.
Okay, thank you. I do have to say that, during the comments, of using this money for different things, it's interesting to think about the other things that it could be used for, but it doesn't sound like there's a lot of other avenues that these dollars could be used for. But I did want to mention, because I think that sometimes, when our police officers are out there and they're trying to do what they can, to engage with the community, they're out there knocking on doors, they're having coffees and tea. I mean, they're literally out there knocking on doors. I just was recently driving down a street, and I won't mention the name of the street, but they're literally out there knocking on doors and just trying to be a part of the community. And, I understand the people that come every week and, they're talking about, different policing matters, that whether they be national or specifically local to us. I definitely understand that. And I agree with some of those statements that are made from them at those times. But in this case, this is a case of a technology that could potentially save someone's life, a technology that could potentially stop people from wanting to shoot off a firearm in the neighborhood, whether it be aiming at someone or just shooting it in the air. It could prevent them from wanting to do things like that. And I think I always say this, and I've said this multiple times in city council meetings and also public safety meetings. In Old Town Pasadena, no one thinks about shooting off a weapon. And the main reason why you don't think about shooting off a weapon in Old Town Pasadena is because you can't go to Old Town Pasadena without running into police officers regularly. I'm in Old Town, I see them all the time. So I think it's interesting that, and I live in the neighborhood, right, that this technology will be installed. I think it's interesting that people say that the neighborhood has been over-policed when I walk outside, and I can sit outside for 3, 4, 5 hours if I wanted to, which I don't do it all the time. But very rarely do I ever see, I do see police officers, but rarely do I see them drive past my home. So yes, there are extra patrols in the neighborhood right now because the typical response from the police department, and Lieutenant Grisafi, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere, typical response is after shooting, neighbors call in, they talk about the extra presence that they would like to see from the police department. That stays around as long as the police department has the wherewithal and employees to actually be able to do that. And then once it dissipates, right, and police officers now go back to their regular shifts and patrolling the neighborhood, and then it goes all over again. Another shooting happens, not a person gets hit, maybe just a shooting in the sky, and the neighbors call and ask for, this has been at least the cycle that I've been seeing since I've been elected. Lieutenant Grisafi, would you say that is a fair assessment of how we respond to shootings?
Yeah, I think we respond when necessary, and then you're right, as the investigation continues or starts to come to a conclusion, then we move on to the next situation or the next shooting or problem wherever our services are required. I think the intent of this program is for us to get there before anybody has to call, and for us to make the contact with the community members and make them feel better and help them deal with the situation, the traumatic situation that just occurred, maybe in front of their house, maybe around the block or whatever. It helps them, and that's the intent of the program.
And so this type of technology, would it bring more police officers to a neighborhood after a shooting occurred? Of course, there'd probably be more police officers right after a shooting occurred. But do you see the policing in certain neighborhoods to continue to increase because you put this technology there?
No,
would you see that? Go ahead.
I think, sir, I think what's going to occur is we're going to see a reduction in gunfire incidents. I think that officers initially will be deployed to the areas to try to solve the incident that occurred, the shooting that occurred. But it depends on resources. As you mentioned, we can't post a police officer in front of every block. We don't have that amount of resources. So what we will do is we will respond as necessary. And as we continue to get information, or as we continue to utilize the technology, because of the deterrent factor, shootings are going to dissipate. They'll be reduced significantly, and that's according to all the different agencies that I spoke with. So I don't think that it's going to be an increase in police presence in certain communities. Well, we will go where the resources are needed.
Okay, thank you for that, Lieutenant. I really appreciate the comments. I'll just say that, after every shooting in my district, or whenever I have one or that's near or borderline or even in Pasadena, we typically have the police department will come out. We'll have a discussion with the neighbors. We'll hear from the neighbors. These meetings are kind of heated at sometimes, right? Lieutenant Grisafi's been there a few, so he would understand. And one of the constant, I would say, one of the constant themes that come from these meetings, and I understand people's rights, I respect their rights, and I respect their right to privacy, is neighbors always ask, well, why doesn't the city just put up cameras? That's every time I have one of these meetings, I already know that I'm going to be asked that question multiple times, or it's going to be put in a chat box if it's a Zoom call. Well, number one, we want to protect your privacy. I think that is important, but we also want to deter people from creating your neighborhood not being that neighborhood that you want to enjoy with your family in front of your home, or walk your dog in, or just sleep restfully at night. I think this is a quality of life thing, and I see it that way. And I think that our police department will be able to, and hopefully those that are shooting off guns and weapons are able to arrest them, so that we could stop these individuals from doing it, because a lot of the time there's a pattern and a lot of these people are the same people shooting off the weapons. And so I just have to thank city staff for bringing this to our council tonight. I understand that this is a pilot, and I would like to motion this pilot and have it come back to the Public Safety Committee within 12 months of the issuance to see, has it been helpful, et cetera, or has it not been helpful? Should we stop this immediately? So that is my motion, is that it would just come back to the Public Safety Committee, and then eventually the council, if the Public Safety Committee decides that they need to discontinue, we need to discontinue it.
Thank you,
But
Mr.
that's fine with the council, or it can come back to directly to the council. I'm either way on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. Vice Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question is for Javon. I'm curious, I know the Citizens Police Oversight Commission is in training but not operational. If they were operational, what type of, would they be involved, or would this be in their purview? I'm just trying to understand what role they might play if they were fully in place.
Councilmember Wilson, their role is advisory to the council. So if the council did seek the input of the commission, they could so put this in front of them, but there's nothing that requires some technology like this to go through the commission, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand, hopefully that will be operational sooner rather than later. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed we don't have all the resources in place to bring that commission online. You know, in my view, I see this as kind of a balancing act between what I think the police department believes will allow them to provide higher quality service and enhance public safety in an area where there's been concentration of gun violence. I do also appreciate Councilmember Kennedy's concern about stigmatizing potential area by setting a boundary of where this technology is being deployed. Fortunately, in District 7, we've been lucky not to have much gun violence in this part of town, and we don't have to kind of make that trade-off between putting technology in that may be seen intrusive. My sense is there probably is a public safety benefit to the technology, but I also appreciate the real-world concerns around putting this type of technology in a very circumscribed part of our town. So I'm of the mind to let those council members who community this has impacted, those are the things that I, once again, in your shoes, would be weighing of, do we think the reduction, as Councilmember Madison said, in gun violence is the #1 thing that we should be thinking about, and that's a quality of life issue for part of our community, and I'm all for spending dollars to improve quality of life. But if we do feel like this is blemishing a part of town that we're committed to elevating, then I appreciate that as well. So it's one of those areas where it's not a clear choice to me, and I appreciate both perspectives and eager to see what, once again, I know what Councilmember Kennedy's position, I think Councilmember Hampton has expressed his position. I think Councilmember Rivas, I'll be curious to see if you're in favor. So I'm prepared to support the majority of the council members where this technology is being implemented, because I think they're most affected by it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wilson. I'm prepared to second Mr. Hampton's motion. You know, again, nothing stigmatizes a community more than the potential feeling of people that they are unsafe in their own neighborhood. And to the extent that this technology is an additional tool to deter that type of activity, to catch the perpetrators of this type of criminal activity, and in some instances render aid to victims, then I think we should support it. With all the safety protocols that this council and potentially the commission, should we ask the commission to look at this in our discretion, should find necessary. And by the way, members of, as should this item pass, members of the commission who have expressed an opinion about this technology should be recused, much like a member of the planning commission would recuse themselves for forming an opinion about and stating it publicly about a project or a plan before that project or plan comes forward. If we're going to have oversight, it should be with integrity and should be open and honest advice, or maybe honest is not the correct word. It should be fair advice to the community and to this full city council. And so I'm looking forward to the city attorney, to working with the city attorney as we come back with protocols for that commission along those lines. So, I just don't, this week, Councilmember Rivas and I will be out in the community as the result of some recent shooting activity, together with the city manager, together with, I'm sure, Lieutenant Grisafi and the police chief and others, meeting and talking with individuals who are affected. And I can assure you that the number one subject will be, what can we do differently? What can we do to stem these occurrences? And it doesn't surprise me to have received communications from people who say, put up cameras, who live in, as I do, and Councilmember Rivas does, and Mr. Hampton and Mr. Kennedy do. We have got to act. We all live in the affected communities. Councilmember Williams, I think you do too. Yeah, immediately adjacent. And, we can tell you firsthand, talking, the neighbors I talk with, the residents we meet with after an incident, aren't the people that we're hearing from for the most part. Not here, but we definitely hear from them when we go out there. And we'll be out there with Councilmember Rivas and the police department. And I can almost guarantee what we're going to hear, but I'm not going to 80% or 90%. I'm not going to give that guarantee, but we've all heard it before. And so I'm prepared to, and I've seconded the motion. Any other questions or comments before we call the roll?
Just to respond to Vice Mayor Wilson's question of what my stance is, just to elaborate before we vote. I too, it sounds like I'm conflicted like you are, but given everything that's gone on in my district the last year and beyond, and going out and talking to residents, talking to neighbors, I really do have to be deferent to their wishes and their concerns. And we hear repeatedly calls to try new things, try new technologies. And so while I am wary, I think it's worth a try. And so a 1 year period, 1 year trial, we'll bring it back and review it and really take a close look at it, I think is worth doing. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, so on the question, if we can call the roll.
Approve the staff recommendation with a report back to either the Public Safety Committee or the City Council within 12 months. Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
No.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
I'm sorry, did Councilmember Hampton vote?
he did. Yes.
Is he a yes?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm-
yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm a yes then as well.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
Motion passes 7 in favor, 1 against.
Okay, thank you, Lieutenant Grisafi. Very good job with the presentation and coming back to us after a thorough, what I consider to be a review at public safety. There were lots of questions asked by members of the community, by members of the committee, and you did a good job of coming back with information in response.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay. I think that completes our